Welcome back to the Pearls and Perils podcast. I'm your host, Peta-Kay, and welcome to People Pleaser Anonymous. If you are a people pleaser, this episode is for you. But if you aren't, this episode is also for you because I'm sure that you have at least one people pleaser in your life that you can support as they're probably struggling right now and they need some help. I would say, as someone who at some point in my life, I was definitely a people pleaser. I know how difficult it can be to learn to build healthy boundaries, to learn to say no to people. It can be so hard when your natural inclination is to want to help people, or it is to want to be liked. I think a lot of the times our desire to be people pleasers comes from the desire to be liked, to be accepted, to not want to be confrontational or to rock the boat, to not want to seem like a difficult person. There's so many different aspects of it. But what I want to focus more so on today is really just speaking about some of the challenges of being a people pleaser and how you can build healthy boundaries if you are someone who would say that you have people pleaser tendencies. So firstly, let's talk about some of the challenges. Some of the challenges of being a people pleaser is accepting the fact that you're going to disappoint people. And I think a lot of the times our people pleaser tendencies are rooted in the fact that we want to be liked, we want to be accepted, we don't want to seem like a difficult person, we don't want to disappoint people. And I think that's sometimes one of the harsh truths you have to accept if you are a people pleaser. You cannot please everyone. And even sometimes when you overextend yourself to the point that you're saying yes to things that you do not have the capacity to do, but you're saying yes anyway, or you find it difficult to communicate or even just to say no for things, it can be hard because in your overextension of yourself, you're pleasing that person, but at the same time, you are depleting yourself. You're putting yourself in a position where you are overextended, you're struggling, you don't have time for yourself. And I think another one of the challenges is actually learning to prioritize your goals. And if that's not something that comes naturally to you and you are a people pleaser, it can be really difficult to say no to things that don't align with your goals, to say no to things that are going to set you back. So even if we looked at things financially, one thing I've found a lot with clients that have people pleaser tendencies is that they tend to overspend, not necessarily on themselves or their own goals or things that they want to do. They tend to overspend on other people's projects or things that they've committed to doing to help someone, or to even do something. It may even be a social event, but again, because of that people pleaser tendency, they found it difficult to say no because maybe that thing wasn't in their budget, or in saying yes to that thing that they can't really afford, they've essentially overstretched themselves. And then it gets to a point where it's then affecting their own goals and the things that they should be focusing on. So I think that could be one of the challenges, actually learning to put your goals first. And that may sound like, oh, we should be selfish. But I think there's a healthy balance between actually focusing on the things that you should be. One of the things that have helped me with being a people pleaser is, would I want someone that I love and care about to be overstretching and overextending themselves just to help me? Like, I just don't think that's love. If I knew that someone helping me meant that they're so overstretched and burnt out that they're not able to do the things they should be doing, I wouldn't want to receive that help because at the end of the day, they can't even help me. And I think sometimes it's just a matter of learning to communicate and actually just being open and honest with where you're at. And we'll get into the boundaries later, but this is some of the challenges. And I think if you are someone that you have people pleasers in your life and you recognize that that's how they are, it can be quite easy to always go to those people when you need help with things because you know they're never going to say no. And there is a line between knowing that they're reliable and also taking advantage of the fact that they have that nature. And I think this is where you need to be careful and also conscious of the people that you have around you, because yes, they may not have the boundaries yet, but if you care about that person, you shouldn't be taking advantage of the fact that they don't have boundaries. And so I think that's one of the things that can be really difficult, but it's really a matter of, if you recognize that that's how you are, it's one, being aware of that and also actually actively doing something about it. Because if you're not careful and you are someone that's a people pleaser, you're going to get to a point where you're so stretched and burnt out that you're going to become bitter. So even in the things that you are maybe helping people with or that you're doing, that should be things that bring you joy, that make you happy, especially if you're someone that naturally gets pleasure from helping people. It's going to get to a point where you're doing things, but you're doing it begrudgingly. And that's when it becomes pointless. Like, what is the point of doing something? Yes, it may seem nice on the outside. If you're doing it, but deep down you're resentful, or deep down you're feeling like, oh, this person is taking advantage of me, but yet you're still doing that thing. And this is where we have to be careful. I think a lot of the times in relationships where maybe people have been friends for a long period of time, or they've had seemingly a very close relationship, and then suddenly they just don't talk anymore. A lot of the time it's situations like this. It's repetitive cycles of things that happen in this way, where the person that tends to be more the people pleaser in the relationship, or tends to be more of the giver in the relationship, should I say, they're constantly accepting things, or maybe there's things they're not happy about, but again, they never voice those opinions, or maybe until one day they literally just burst and say everything that they've been feeling. But the way that it's then communicated, it's just not in the right way, and as a result it destroys the friendship. So I think it's always better, if you can, to prevent these things happening. And if you recognize, you know what, this is me and I have this kind of tendency, to learn how to communicate when those situations happen, to even learn when, oh, do you know what, I just need to take a moment so I can truly think about this thing before I agree and commit myself to something that I'm later going to regret, or I'm going to be begrudging of. So let's talk about some healthy boundaries to set. Now, the first thing I would say is give yourself time to think, especially if you're the kind of person that you're always saying yes to everything. Before you've even thought about what you're agreeing to, your natural inclination is just to say yes. Definitely give yourself time to think before committing things, whether that's in your personal life or in work. If you just received that email asking you if you've got the space or the room to do such and such, before you just reply to be like, yeah, sure, I'll help, like actually think, do I have space? Do I have capacity to take this project on? Because it's so easy to say yes, and then later on to realize, oh my gosh, I actually don't have the time, the resource, or capacity to do this thing. And then you end up doing something, but maybe not doing it to your best, or the quality is not good, or other things that you should be focusing on gets compromised. So I definitely say give yourself some time to think. It doesn't necessarily have to be 24 hours or a week, because sometimes that is just too long. But even if it's just giving yourself an hour, I'll get back to you an hour, to actually then think about that thing, look at your schedule, and make an actual sound judgment on whether you can commit to that thing or not. And this is definitely something that you can apply in your career, and it's also something you can apply in your relationships with people outside of work. Another thing I'd say, which is important, is creating a mental people pleaser checklist. This is something that I work through for myself. And it's only when I was kind of writing my notes for this podcast, I realized, oh, that's actually something I do. Because when it comes to my own people pleasing, for depending on the relationship that I have, it can be very easy to say no. But if it's someone that I care about, let's say it's family or someone I'm really close to, it will be a lot more difficult for me as far as like having people pleaser tendencies. Whereas if it's someone that I'm not super close to, it's a lot easier to say no. It's a lot easier to set those boundaries. But again, when there's that familiar relationship or there's some kind of deeper bond, it becomes a lot more difficult. So what I would say is having like a mental checklist in your head. So firstly, why am I agreeing to do this thing? Do I have the capacity to take this on? Will doing this help or harm me in some way? And I think it's really important to think about that, because yes, sometimes maybe what's being required of you is not necessarily financial. It might be your time, it might be your effort, it might be maybe you're lending someone something, you're loaning someone something, should I say. And it's also thinking about those things like, why am I doing this? Do I actually want to do this? Because sometimes we do things because, again, we want to be agreeable, we want to be liked. And unfortunately, I think if you look at it deeper, especially if you have very, very deep people pleaser tendencies, a lot of the time that is also linked to low self-esteem. Because I think the more confident and secure you are in yourself, the easier it is for you to actually speak up for yourself, for you to voice your opinions. But generally, when you tend to be someone who maybe has a lower self-esteem, perhaps you've gone through difficult things, difficult experiences where your voice hasn't been heard, or people have bullied you or put you down when you've tried to speak up for yourself, in those situations, it becomes a lot more difficult for you to actually say no, for you to actually speak up for yourself in situations where it might be awkward or difficult, or you're going to have to come out of your comfort zone. And so sometimes when we do have these deep people pleaser tendencies, it does often stem from a lack of self-esteem or a lack of confidence. And I think unless you go to the deeper root of it and actually start working on that, you're constantly going to find yourself in that negative cycle. And being a people pleaser, I don't think it's really a bad thing. I think generally, if it comes from a place of just wanting to help people and that's your natural nature, there's nothing wrong with that. And I don't think it's necessarily something that you should change or it's a bad thing. But I think it's something you just have to be very conscious of, and having a healthy balance in terms of how you actually navigate the relationships you have when you know you have that tendency, because unfortunately sometimes people will take advantage of the fact that they know you have that nature, and as a result they will, continuously ask you for help or try to get you to do things that they want to do because it somehow favors them. And I think that's why it's important to have a healthy balance and an awareness of this if that's who you are. And also, if you do have certain people in your life that you feel like, I think this person's actually taking advantage of my kindness, it's also being aware of that and not allowing that to continue. And so, this is why I think another aspect as well, which I wanted to touch on, is oversharing and feeling an obligation to share certain information. Generally, people that are people pleasers tend to be oversharers. And that's because, again, they don't want to disappoint people. So maybe there's something going on or there's something new that's happening, and maybe you don't really want to talk about it, but someone asks you, and maybe because you've been friends for a certain number of years or time, or maybe that person has always been open with you about their life and things that's going on, you kind of feel this sense of obligation, like, oh, I do need to tell them what's going on. I do need to open up. But you don't have to. You're not obligated to share certain information about your life with people, especially if you don't feel comfortable in doing so. I think it's one thing to genuinely share something because you have that kind of rapport and relationship with that person and you feel confident and safe to share it, as opposed to just sharing something because you feel like, oh, I just have to, or if I don't, they're going to be upset with me. I think if a lot of your decisions are centered around, oh, if I don't do this, this person will be upset with me, or this person will be disappointed in me, that's when you can actually recognize and see, yeah, this is a people pleaser tendency. Because again, all of your decision making is being centered around not disappointing people. You want to seem nice. And I think being nice is a good thing, but there are going to be times where you are going to have to disappoint people. And that's just life. We can't always get what we want. And if we did, we'd be very spoiled. And that's probably why as a humanity we are quite spoiled, because we're used to getting what we want in the time that we want. And I think even that in itself is a part of our selfish nature, and that's why it's important for you to kind of recognize those times when you're doing that. And shifting the conversation slightly, so how can you support people pleasers in your life? So what I would say is, firstly, reassuring that person of their support regardless of whether their answer is going to give you the answer you want or not. So I think if I had a friend in my life that I know that this person, she's a people pleaser or he's a people pleaser, and I was asking them for help on something, one thing I'd say is like, listen, if you don't have the time to do it, like honestly, you don't have to say yes. Just already giving them that reassurance that if you say no, like it is okay, it's perfectly fine. Like now that I'm saying it, I can think of an example of this. Yeah, I can't remember exactly the whole situation, but I do remember there was someone that I had a similar conversation with. And I said something along those lines to them, is like, you don't have to do this, if you don't want to, it's actually okay. And I think it's just important when you recognize that someone is a people pleaser and they're not at a place where they can really exercise those boundaries themselves, to kind of give them that support instead of taking advantage, or because they're going to say yes, just kind of getting them to do what you want. I think it's also important just to really reassure them, like, you don't have to say yes if you don't want to. And you might be like, oh, well, they should advocate for themselves. Not everyone is in that place yet. And I think that's the part of relationships and friendships that's important, supporting each other. If you know your friend isn't in that place yet, supporting them to get there instead of like just expecting that they should. I think also another thing is not taking them for granted, because I think it's so easy when you have people in your life that are reliable, that are always there. It's so easy to take those relationships for granted and to take the kindness and the things that they do for granted because you just expect that they should do it. And honestly, nobody is obliged, or yeah, nobody's obliged to do anything. Like, especially when it comes to relationships, unless this is like your partner and someone you're married to and you've made vows to each other, like no one is obliged to do anything. And I think if someone is being kind, is being helpful, is reliable, don't take that for granted, because it's so easy for us to do this and to kind of get to that place of just feeling entitled to people's time and entitled to people's effort and their love. And I think, yeah, don't take people for granted. Don't take those relationships for granted. And I think another thing as well is showing your appreciation to that person. It doesn't always necessarily need to be something monetary or a gift, but even just saying, do you know what, thank you, I appreciate the things that you do. Because even sometimes what can become frustrating if you are someone that's a people pleaser is when people take you for granted, or when your kindness is taken for weakness. So just showing appreciation to that person will make such a huge difference. But the biggest thing I would say is that you can do to support the people pleasers in your life is really just being a sounding board for them. Or even if you notice that there's certain things that they're doing that you can just tell, like, they're not happy in doing that. The people pleaser tendencies are probably what's leading them to make those decisions. Even just kind of helping them in love to kind of recognize that you might want to rethink that commitment that you're making or that decision that you're making, because sometimes when you're in the thick of it, you can't actually recognize what you're doing. It just seems, especially when it's a common nature to you, it just seems normal. But I think having like a valid sounding board and having someone that can say to you that, I think you need to rethink that, or I don't think, that's probably going to be a good decision for you in the long run. Like, doing so in love, obviously, not making fun of the person or putting them down or being, saying things that's going to draw them down, but actually building them up and helping them to recognize that you might want to rethink that. And of course, at the end of the day, all you can do is give your advice. If you want to take it or not, that's up to them. But I think just providing that sounding board, like a valid sounding board, is also super helpful, because maybe in that moment the person might not necessarily recognize or even take on what you've said, but perhaps in the future it's going to be something that they'll remember, and it may even give them the confidence when they go for another similar situation for them to then take that advice on board. So I think that's definitely something that you can do to support the people pleasers in your life. Don't take them for granted, and don't take advantage of the fact that they don't have those boundaries yet. And another thing you can do to help them is definitely share this episode with them. But those were just some challenges that I could think about. I would say that this episode is more of a part one. I definitely want to do like a people pleaser kind, maybe not a series, but there's a couple of topics I want to speak about surrounding people pleaser tendencies. And the next thing I want to touch on is more so being a people pleaser and how it can affect you financially. That has been in my content tracker for a good couple of weeks, and I definitely want to record an episode talking about that. So what I want to know from you guys, do you struggle with people pleasing tendencies? If you're listening on Spotify, there is a poll, so all you need to do is vote in the poll so I can know, because I definitely want to continue exploring this topic, because there's so many different aspects that we can talk about, whether it's people pleasing when it comes to your family or in relationships as well. That's another thing, romantic relationships, that is. And also, I definitely want to speak about people pleasing and how that can affect you financially, because it's something that has been coming up a lot lately in my coaching sessions. So I definitely want to explore it with you guys on the podcast. I hope that you've enjoyed today's episode. It's a nice, short and sweet one. And what I will say today is, if you've enjoyed today's episode or you've resonated with it in some way, please share this episode. And also, if you haven't done so already, then please leave a rating or review. One thing I will say is that social media is powerful, okay? As much as I have my love-hate relationship with it, I would say that it's such a powerful tool when used for good. So if you found this episode useful, share it. Share it on your stories if you've got Instagram, share it on your Facebook if you're a Facebooker, Twitter, well, X. What else is there? TikTok, Snapchat, whatever. Share it, because honestly, you may think, oh, but I don't really have many followers. Listen, people watch. And if you share it, at least one person will listen to it. And perhaps that will be the person that needs to hear it. But thank you so much for listening. And I will see you in the next episode. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week. And I'll be back with you in the next